So, we've gotten to the point in the program that you have been waiting for. Matt Dillahunty is an American public speaker, avid gamer, magician, and internet personality, and was president of the atheist community of Austin from 2006 to 2013. He has hosted the Austin-based webcast and cable access television show, The Atheist Experience, since 2005, and formerly hosted the live internet radio show, Nonprofits Radio. A Southern Baptist for more than 25 years, he sought to become a minister until his investigation of his religious views led him to reject supernatural claims. He now identifies as a skeptic, humanist, and atheist. He is a founder and contributor of the counter-apologetics encyclopedia, Iron Chariots, as well as the Atheist Debates Patreon project, which are dedicated to providing the understanding and tools for more effective discussions between theists and atheists. He is regularly engaged in formal debates and travels the world speaking to secular organizations, churches, and university groups on religion, philosophy, skepticism, atheism, humanism, and magic. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, Matt Dillahunty.
All right, I already talked to you guys earlier, so we'll get this over real quick. Don't believe in God, try to have a good life. Glad you came. I'm only half lying. A lot of you know me from the TV show, from debates. Debates aren't all that I do, and it's not all that I would recommend anybody else do. Earlier, I did a little poll about how many people were atheists, and trust that nobody thinks that was entirely self-serving. Maybe a little bit. The other thing is, somebody pointed out afterwards that a better question to ask, perhaps, would be how many people became better at defending their atheism through watching the show or the debates or the projects and stuff. And I won't do that poll because it leads to the next question, which is how many other people, because they are more comfortable with it, felt better about it, were able to go out and make more atheists. And by the way, make atheists is wrong. It's an inaccurate phrase. On some occasions, you might be creating someone who's now a non-believer. In other cases, you might just be getting someone to realize that that's what they've been. A number of times, it's like I don't know what label to put on this thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about labels and community. And I want to start with one thing, which is there is a non-zero chance that I will offend somebody here or say something that is incorrect. If that's the case, take a note, jot it down, fix it. Come up to me, let me know, hey, what you said was incredibly offensive, or this was just monumentally wrong. That's how we get better. I've said before that the best thing about finding out you were wrong is that you don't have to stay wrong. Now you get to go on and, hey, I've learned something new and I can apply this. But also, I try to be as precise as I can with language, and it's impossible because language is something we play with. We invent words, we juggle things around, and we just assume that the people we're talking to, they have the same understanding or close enough understanding of what we're saying that nothing's going to get lost in translation, and almost all the time something's going to get lost in translation. But I try, after many years of doing the show, to be specific. And despite that, there are people who will absolutely get my position exactly wrong. That's so frustrating. How can I explain this over and over and over in 20 different ways, and yet you still come back with me and tell me that what you heard was, and what you heard was nothing at all like what I meant? JT mentioned earlier about the philosophy majors who were using polysyllabic words and running on at the mouth, and let me just throw in all this technical jargon and nobody gets it. That's not the only problem. The other problem is assuming you're talking about the same thing when you're talking past each other. The entire debate that I did with Mike Lacona, he was using two different versions of supernatural, And I didn't even figure out which one he was relying on to bolster the other one until closer to the end of the debate. So I've been hosting the TV show for about 12 years. I've been an active member of the community for a little bit longer than that. And the truth is, when I say active member of the community, there is no the community. I've talked about this before. Oh, I'm in the atheist community. Okay, there's not just one of those. There's the YouTube atheist community, which there's probably 40 of those. There's the online but not YouTube atheist community. There's the local atheist communities. There's the national atheist communities. There's this organization and that organization. And boy, we agree on everything, don't we? I mean, we're like lock, stock, right down that aisle, everybody. There's no division, no disagreement in our movements. There is. I can't, so my wife, by the way, who's not here, unfortunately, she's from Cleveland, Tennessee. Anybody here from Cleveland? I know somebody's here. Yeah. She went to ETSU and lived in Johnson City. Anybody here from there? She should have come. And we will probably end up in Nashville, North Carolina. We love the region. We come up here to visit family. I do a lot of conventions. I won't, blow smoke at you and say, this is my favorite, but it's definitely one of them. And I'll tell you why. American Atheist Convention, you might have 700 to 900 people. That's a national convention from one of the leading organizations. You guys have, 450 for the Nashville nuns? This isn't even just specifically Tennessee, it's just marketed. What we need are the national nuns and build this up into a brand that is even broader than what it is. I like the label. I've done a lot of talks about how we identify ourselves. Do I identify as an atheist, an agnostic, a freethinker, a secularist, whatever label you want to put on there. I like nuns because it's inclusive, and I think it starts conversation. Somebody needs to plug their phone in. I heard it. Immediately, I wanted to grab mine to make sure it wasn't mine running out. It starts conversations, and it's inclusive. I know David Silverman was here last year to tell everybody why they desperately need to use the atheist label. And I will kind of agree in that I want as many out atheists as possible. I'm an atheist. But I don't care what label you personally choose to identify with. What I care more about is what you actually think and what you're willing to do. If you want to say, I personally prefer a label of secularist or agnostic or freethinker or whatever, fine. Can we get on with what we're doing? There is a caution, though, and that is, if what you say is, I'm not using that label because those people think this and you get it wrong. I don't identify as an atheist because they're just as fundamentalist as the Christians. Wrong. I don't identify as an atheist because they're absolutely certain there is no God. Wrong! There's no absolute certainty in anything. You're either convinced that God exists or you're not. If you're convinced, you're a theist. If you're not, you're an atheist, no matter what label you use. That's my view of it. That is a fairly common view. There are others. By the way, I've disagreed with every single person in the movement on something, including me, multiple times. Don't take anything that I say here as gospel truth, even if I'm on a church stage. Think about it. Talk to other people. Talk to me. Talk to somebody else. One of the things that happens is you can teach people how to get better at defending their skepticism, their lack of religion, whatever label you want to put on it. And you can build a community. Oh, we're a bunch of nuns now. The nuns, the fastest growing religious identity currently in the United States, or at least based on the latest information I got, that's the case. Awesome. Now what? You're done believing in God, or you're not really going to church anymore. Now what? I've worked with I did not start the atheist community of Boston. It was around long before I got there. I did not start the Atheist Experience TV show. I didn't start anything. And so people come up to me and they'll say, you guys have such an awesome group in Austin. How did you do it? What should I do? I don't know. I can tell you how the atheist community of Austin started with an ad in the newspaper. Get a few like-minded people together at a bagel shop, at a coffee shop. We have a lot of that going on. There's skeptics in the pub meetings, there's gatherings of different things. And I love that because if there's one thing that I've started to shift focus on, other than doing more magic shows, it's making sure that we have community landing spaces for people to land in when they find their way out of religion. It's why I love coming to conventions like this. It's shocking to me to see this size of a group. Somebody asked me, is this typical? No, that you guys are not typical. Now, it may be the case that if your state tries to make the Bible the official book of the state, you get better attendance at one of these events. But as the movement has grown, there's been a great focus on diversity. And I think we're doing better. I'm happier to see not a blanket of white out here in this crowd the way I have at a lot of other events. I'm always happy to see anybody who's willing to show up and listen to why did you show up to listen to this jackass ramble on? But we're doing better, but we can continue to do better. One of the things that's happening, and it's not just in the secular communities, is mountains of division. Oh my gosh, what are these people trying to do to my secular movement? Screw you, it was never yours. I appreciate your efforts. We're growing. We're growing, and as we grow, we have more interests and more things that we can do. Oh, well, it's just terrible now. There's fighting here, there's a scandal there. Yes, that's what happens when you grow. You know when the atheist movement didn't have problems and divisiveness and scandal? When it was 20 white guys at a bar talking about how much religion sucks. When you start adding people, what you're seeing are growing pains, and now we've got to focus on how do we deal with it. The first thing is, we don't need one single secular organization. One monolithic national one? No. We don't even need one, merely one, just in Nashville. There are people with different interests, and they can cooperate on the interests they share, and then they can go off and work independently on the things that they don't share. It doesn't have to be an us or them. The key is to figure out what is important to you. That might not be as important to somebody else, and they might be a terrible person for that. Seriously, they could actually be a terrible human being for not caring as much about this particular issue, or they might have another issue that is very important to them, and you guys might not get to work together too much. Perfection is the enemy of the good, or at least the enemy of the good enough. This community isn't perfect for me in every way. I'm done with it, and I go off and start my own. The attitude there that leads to starting a new organization is problematic, but it may in fact be that the best case scenario is to start yet another organization. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want everybody to go out here. I don't want 450 organizations with single individuals going, this is me and my secular organization. You're free to do that, but there also has to be some unity. And so you have to pick your battles. You have to decide what hill you're willing to die on. This doesn't just apply to the community. This applies everywhere in your life. I block people on Facebook and Twitter all the time because I have two pet peeves, which I already told you earlier. Don't talk to me like I'm a moron or whatever label I should use. Somebody correct me on that later. Don't talk to me like I'm an irrational buffoon. And don't waste my time. I get to waste as much time as I want. And so, when we're trying to figure out what battles to pick, how many people have had someone that when they were first introduced to them, they absolutely despised them and then later became the best of friends? How many people have had the reverse happen where you've had a lifelong friend who turned out to be a monumental piece of crap at some point and you had to cut him out of your life? Okay, so this is a common experience that people are familiar with. We tend to lose sight of those sorts of aspects of reality because we're focused on the moment. because right now you're right and you're my friend, and right now you're a terrible human being that I want nothing to do with. And it overshadows things. We are prone to hyperbole. I gave a talk once called "Hyperbole Will Destroy the World," and I think it might. And so what you try to do is you start building communities. There are going to be personality conflicts, inevitable. There are going to be people you don't like. There are going to be people who don't like you. You can't make everybody happy all the time. The feedback that I get on the show is amazing. Oh, Matt, you're awesome. You have the best. You're the best, and you have the most patience. And okay, well, that's not true. I get impatient. I hang up on people. I make mistakes. I've said awful things on occasion. I've been an awful person on occasion. But the feedback goes like this. I watched the show last week, and that call went on forever. Why don't you hang up? Sometimes we let people go on too long. I'm optimistic about getting to a point. I watched the show last week. You have absolutely no patience. You're a raging asshole. And you, one person said I had the personality of Bill O'Reilly on PCP. Somebody else will email in and say, that was an amazing call. You got them to acknowledge something or think about something, and you had the patience to wait through all this. And those two people are talking about the exact same call on the exact same show. Recognize that when you're evaluating anything, whether it's your own performance, my performance, what's going on in the community, you have baggage that you're bringing to the table, which may not make your assessment objective. It almost guarantees that it can't be. Now, I'm an atheist, potentially an agnostic atheist, depending on how we're not going to go into a big, long discussion about the background philosophical stuff with those labels. I'm a skeptic. I'm an atheist because I'm a skeptic, which lands me in fights with my skeptic friends who want to say that skepticism doesn't lead to atheism. They're wrong, in the sense that philosophical skepticism, the idea that you want to believe true things and not false things, necessarily leads to soft atheism, the I am not convinced that a God exists type. I'm an atheist, I'm a skeptic, I'm a humanist. There's a ton of labels that I would apply to myself. I'm a feminist. Some of those labels are really confusing and aren't used correctly. And merely saying they're not used correctly is already a big damn problem, because who am I to determine which one's the correct usage? It already injects a bias in it that I'm using it correctly. And we make assumptions. There are people who will say, Matt is great on religious issues, but he's terrible on issue Y. You can insert almost anything for Y, whether it's alien invasion, the Illuminati, the Bilderbergers, 9/11, feminism, Black Lives Matter, social justice, whatever their pet issue is, that's what I'm bad on. And to all of them, I ask the same two questions. What is my position, and why do you think it's wrong? To date, no one has ever answered the first one correctly. Instead of accurately relaying what my position is, they take a straw man version of what somebody else said that they loosely associate with the particular label or issue in question and say this. Labels are a good thing. They allow us to package things neatly so we can understand it. But the more things that you package with a label, the less useful it becomes. What's the feminist position on pornography? Dun, dun, dun. Well, if you ask Sansar Taylor or Tasleem Nazreen, who both identify as feminists, they are vehemently anti-porn. It is the bane of human existence. It is abusive to women, and blah, 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 blah. And they have really good points. If you ask someone like Greta Christina, who's a feminist, or me, although I probably shouldn't include myself in this, but we're okay with porn. Yeah, Matt got up and talked about porn for an hour. The point is, before you try and put somebody in a box because you need to label them, make sure you're talking about what their view is accurately. I talked before about not pretending that you're a mind reader, but why are we so averse to actually saying, oh, you know, I know a bunch of people who identify with that particular label. What do you mean by that? How are you using that? I am an SJW, beneficiary of mountains of privilege, cisgendered, able-bodied, virtue signaling, I can't read what that one's, oh, snowflake, misogynist, racist, Nazi sympathizing cuck, depending on who you talk to. I don't know how many of those I would apply to myself, but the point is, there's a lot of this, and I get it. Because there are people who are very different from me, who have suffered through things that I cannot possibly connect with, and there's absolutely no reason that they should spend a great deal of time trying to educate me. I appreciate it when they do, but that ain't their job. And sometimes the frustration gets so big that it's easier just to label something and dismiss it than it is to recognize that there's potential there for improvement. Now, I've been hosting the show for 12 years, and early on somebody said, oh my gosh, don't take on too much, you'll burn out. You know, you're doing the show, you're the librarian, you're taking over as president of the organization, you're doing these talks and everything, you're gonna burn out. Well, I haven't burned out yet. When it happens, you know, you guys will probably know. Not everybody's the same. Burnout does happen. Labeling is useful, but it can also be lazy and inaccurate. Now, you control your life and you get to decide who's in it. That's not the case. I'm not saying, oh, come on, now let's tolerate terrible people. I'm pretty intolerant of terrible people. And then they claim how intolerant I am. I'm sorry, I don't have to be tolerant of people who are behaving badly, who are spreading horrible, harmful, hateful ideas. But shock of shocks, if I say I'm a feminist, Black Lives Matter, science is real, oh, we're just gonna label you and set you off to the side because you identify with this particular thing. Why is that so shocking? And why is it so difficult to ask somebody what they think? I've had a lot of discussions that were incredibly heated, and I don't always end them the right way. I've given up and been like, you know, hey, I'm not gonna convince this person, this is a waste of my time. I think sometimes I was correct, sometimes I wasn't. Taking some time to reflect on those situations, to realize that every day you are a different person than you were the day before, and maybe, as Bertrand Russell once said, it's a good idea now and then to hang a question mark on things you've long taken for granted. Worst thing you can do if you're getting into a debate is walk in with the intention of showing how smart you are and how right you are. Even if you're incredibly right and incredibly smart, it's very frustrating for me all the time. It's the worst thing you can do because you're no longer worried about an actual conversation. You're not worried about engaging. Tomorrow night's debate is going to be a different format, 10 minutes, whatever, and then a discussion. I mentioned it earlier. I've been looking forward to that because I have more fun, and I think people learn more during the Q&A portions and during the question portions than they do during the presentation portions. Because the presentation portions, even when they're novel, tend to be the things that we've heard over and over. This is something you prepared. This is something you heard from somebody else that you're regurgitating. And so we have those discussions, and sometimes somebody changes their mind. And now we have a new group of people who are identifying as secular, as non-religious. What do we do with them? These communities that are all over, isn't it just a mess? Isn't it too much? No. It's never too much. We have to do our best to keep working to build the organization so that people have a place to land and to cooperate towards specific goals. If we're not doing that, why are we bothering? Why am I going out to debate people? Why am I putting up all sorts of content on how to create the sort of discussion that leads people away from superstitions and religions? Somebody asked Dennis Lubbe, who co-hosts Nonprofits, he and I did it for a long time together, just the two of us. Hey, once you get rid of religion, what do you replace it with? And Dennis said, once you cure cancer, what do you replace it with? There's a hum. I will stay away from that mic. Well, that's where my notes are. You guys are all here. Why? Why did you show up? To support a community. You're at a church. I'm sure some of you were a little like, oh, really? Are we doing it? Yes. And you know why we're doing it at church? Because religions have held a privileged status in the United States and in the bulk of the world for as long as we can remember. They're not going to pay taxes. They get de facto endorsements from anybody and everybody, including the guy that spikes the football on Sunday. They have all of the unfair advantages you could possibly imagine with regard to money, and that allows them to build communities. It allows them to use charities and hospitals and schools to falsely bolster the idea that religion is a good thing. Oh, look at all the good that religion does. No. People are doing good. You don't get to co-opt that. Yes, but isn't it religion that convinced those people to do good? Okay. Perhaps for some people, the first time they were ever presented with the idea that they could do something good was at church. And certainly we know that at different churches, you are almost under an obligation to do good. You know, you got to tithe that 10%, and we're going out to do this. They have a built-in, ready-made, ready to go all the time. You pack up and you move, you leave Nashville, you come to Austin. If you're a Southern Baptist, there's a dozen churches waiting for you. You pack up and you leave here, and you move to Austin, there's only a couple secular communities waiting for you. And there are places where there might not even be that many. And I remember when I was a kid and we'd move, we'd shop for churches. And we moved about every 5 years. My dad worked for the airline. We'd show up in a new town, and we'd go to a couple different churches until we found the one where my mom agreed with the pastor the most. I know my dad's supposed to be the head of the house as Christ is the head of the church, but it was mom who decided, you know, honey, I really think that this pastor is speaking the word of God. Meanwhile, she went through televangelists like crazy, and all of them ended up in a scandal, so I'm not convinced that her God radar is particularly good. But that's how we found a church. How do you find which atheist community, which secular community, which free-thinking community is right for you, just because it has a particular word in the label? I know people who identify as freethinkers that don't want anything to do with their particular local free-thinking group for some reason or another, and they're happier with the atheists or the rationalists or the ethical society or whatever they happen to get involved in. Unitarian Universalist churches because, we got to get our kids into church somehow. No, you don't. And as I mentioned earlier, there's already studies showing that atheists are potentially better parents than theists. Religions for years have taken all the best things about who we are, what we do, the community that we have, the fact that we are social creatures who like to get together and do something like this. And they tried to claim it for their own, and they were successful, and they were supported by governments and regimes for a long time. Communities like this have the obligation, I think, to terminate that trend. When we're here, I have no confusion about what we're doing. I don't care that I love being in a church. Hell, I did that debate in front of 500 Baptists the other day, and I was like a kitten with a bowl of milk. Because you guys, I don't need to really explain to you why God doesn't exist or why we don't have good reason to think that God exists. You got it. Those people are the ones that I wanted to talk to. And my opening joke from the debate was to explain that and then say, you know, apart from myself and my wife, there aren't any other atheists in the room except for those of you who are faking it to be nice to your family and those of you who are secretly in the clergy project. I support and love Recovering from Religion, the Clergy Project, Secular Therapist Project, all of these different organizations. I can't work with everybody. And yet there's this new thing happening as we grow. And I know that we have Sunday Assembly as one of the sponsors here. There's also Oasis, and there's a number of others that are creeping up all over the place. And for whatever reason, somebody decided that it would be good news if we just labeled them atheist church. Well, that's a big problem for me, because first of all, church is not only necessarily Christian, it's pretty much Protestant. So you're ignoring Catholic Mass and the synagogue. You're basically saying, yeah, we're already biased in what our view of religion is, that it's Protestant Christianity. And so you seem to be doing something like those Protestants do, so we're just going to call it church. It's gotten so bad that, anybody here know who Tom Flynn is with the Center for Inquiry? Oh, thank you. Okay, so he hates Christmas. And that causes a conflict with my wife because my wife loves Christmas. So we constantly have battles around Christmas time, trying to educate him about how, if you list the top 10 things that people think about when they think of Christmas, Jesus is lucky to make the list. I mean, it's just not what Christmas is. And it's the Christmas the way we celebrate is this Victorian invention anyway. And we've borrowed from all sorts of religions through syncretic processes But you get to be you don't have to celebrate Christmas. Celebrate whatever the hell you want for whatever reason you want. It's all fine with me. But when you start telling people you shouldn't celebrate Christmas because, and I will quote, rough quote from Flynn because I don't have it in front of me, if you celebrate anything in December, including solstice, he's not just anti-Christmas, celebrating in December means you are giving aid and comfort to the enemy. I can't buy into that, but he's entitled to his view on that and to express it. However, as Sunday Assembly and Oasis and those organizations grew, he also made the statement that if you go to Sunday Assembly or Oasis, you are not sufficiently secular. You are still stuck in the trappings of religion. And I have repeatedly called for him to resign from his position at CFI because I don't want somebody, and people are free to disagree with me, but personally I don't want somebody who's ostensibly representing me and my ideas as in the leadership position in an organization committing a no true Scotsman fallacy to crap on the fact that people want to get together and have a good time and share space, and the people who are going there are the ones who potentially need it the most because they may have lost everything. If you don't like it and you don't want to go, that's entirely your prerogative. But when you tell somebody else, you shouldn't go to that because it's too much like church, you're a jackass. You are conceding the fight, and you are giving credit to the very thing that many of us are standing in opposition to, which is that they don't own humanity. They don't own charity. They don't own community. They don't own anything about who we are, and we will take it the fuck back. Thank you for the amens. I'm actually good with amens, and I don't even use them ironically, because it doesn't mean anything particularly religious. It's just a signaling that you are in agreement. So I have friends who come out of religions who don't want to go to Sunday Assembly because it's too much like church. I get it. There are people who are traumatized from their church experience. Even walking into this room would be too much for them. I'm not telling you that you have to go. There are people, oh, no, I gave money to the church. They were passing the offering plate all the time. I'm not giving money to atheist organizations or secular organizations or free-thinking organizations. Fine, that's your prerogative. But it's not the same, and don't pretend it is. Secular organizations have to potentially jump through some hoops to earn a nonprofit status, but more importantly, their books have to be open. Churches don't have to open their books. You don't have to know where that money goes. It's why you have pastors spending all kinds of money to go off and do illicit things. It's why you have the Mormon church owning things that they are opposed to. It's like, what's that old joke about Baptists don't recognize each other in the liquor store? Yeah. These are the kind of communities that we have to keep working on. These are the sorts of events that we need to keep doing. Now, let me pause. I'm Not Your Guru, which is the title of the Netflix documentary, but I saw it the other day. I didn't watch the documentary because it's probably crap. We don't need a pope of atheism. We don't need somebody to instruct you on how to live your lives. What we need are people sharing experiences and stories that other people can benefit from, and that's largely what I try to do. I have a rather unusual life. I do a live television show where I interact with believers regularly. I go out and do debates. I do lectures. I am blessed to be able to go out to secular communities and see what's going on. And so I can share some of their experiences with others as well. I had an idea years ago for a network called Atheist Communities, plural, of America. There were several people who jumped on. So we had the Atheist Community of Austin, and I think there was the Atheist Community of Topeka and Atheist Community of Toronto that basically took our bylaws that we had a lawyer craft so that we were in good shape and used them to create their organization. If there's an organization here and you've jumped through those hoops to create your legal entity as an organization, share that information with others. Oh, well, they might be competing with us. Tough. I'm not associated officially with any organization except for American Atheists. I'm on the board there. Apart from that, I'm a lone wolf. I don't know anybody anything. I'm happy to point out whatever flaws I see, tell you who I do and don't agree with and how much. But most importantly, it gives me the freedom to run around and say, you know what, I realize that your particular organization has had a conflict with this other one, and you guys don't really want anything to do with each other anymore. And I get it. But is it actually bad enough that you guys can't work together on the part that you do agree on? Americans United has got a table set up in there, and I hear that the Reverend Barry Lynn is going to be retiring, which makes me sad. I can now go rescue him from religion, because for years I refused to, I told him his soul was safe, because I needed to be able to say, look, there's an organization that's about church-state separation, and its leader is a minister or former minister who believes in God. We disagree on that. I will share the stage with Barry Lynn anytime he wants to. As a matter of fact, I'd prefer to be on stage with him than some atheist who I've shared a stage with. Now that he's retired, I'm gonna maybe talk him out of this religion thing. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm not an expert on creating groups. I'm not an expert on sustaining groups. I'm not an expert on how to set up a successful Patreon. I'm not an expert on all the logical fallacies or the arguments for the existence of God. I am seriously just a guy who has an almost obsessive interest in these subjects. How can you keep doing the show? I like it. That guy on the plane, I mean, how do you sit there on the plane and just sit there and wait and be quiet and then invite him to the debate? How do you do that? It's real easy. You sit there and you be quiet and then you invite him to the debate. Having an idea of what you want to do, both individually and with your community and with the communities you build, is critical. There's a couple of notes about that. Well, what can I do? I can't do a debate. I'm not good at public speaking. I'm terrified at these sorts of things. I was terrified of these. When I was 18 years old, I was convinced, along with my parents and the people in my church, that God wanted me to be a preacher. And I was terrified of public speaking. And I had a girlfriend, and I wanted to get married, and I wanted to live life. And I was terrified of potentially speaking in front of people or preaching. And I went off and I joined the Navy, and I did 8 years, and then I worked in the tech industry. And then just at the point where my career was at a high point, it all went away. And I thought, this is God punishing you. He wanted you to be a preacher. You ran away from the calling. You cared more about your career and your friends and your partying. And I'm taking it all away to teach you a lesson. And I said, okay, God, I surrender. I will do exactly what it is that you want to do. And I spent 18 months in prayer and study and visiting with my uncle, who was a medical missionary, and a number of other preachers and everything else. And I needed to find out how to be the best Christian I could be, in part because my roommate was an atheist, and we had just agreed to not talk about these sorts of things because we cared about our friendship. And then I realized, if I'm actually going to get serious, what do I do when I get to heaven and God says, why is your best friend who you love like a brother burning in hell because you valued your friendship on earth over telling him what I told you to tell him? So I set out to find out how to convince an atheist. Long story short, backfired spectacularly. But I didn't have a goal of speaking publicly or lecturing or debating or any of these things. I had a goal to fulfill my obligation under 1 Peter 3:15, to be prepared at all times to give a reason for the faith that I have, and to do so with gentleness and kindness. And by the way, most Christians tend to forget that second part. Actually, funny aside, on Twitter the other day, there was this individual, the woman who called the show, I ended up blocking her. And this guy's like, oh, Matt Dillahunty's a coward who can't handle an argument with a woman or something like that. And I just replied with LOL. And he took that tweet and he posted it, and he's like, here's how an atheist responds. And I was like, okay, not really. So I wrote a longer response that said it was more reply than your comment deserved, because you just called someone a coward whose job is to debate people and who does a live show taking on, whoever. And his response to that was, bring it, bitch. I desperately wanted to retweet that and say, this is how a Christian responds. But before I had the chance, he said something terrible and misogynistic, so I blocked his ass and moved on with my life, because sometimes that's what you've got to do. So I'm a humanist. As far as I can tell, I've got exactly one life. If there's an afterlife, it's a bonus. If there's an afterlife, I have no evidence for it. If it's an afterlife, I have no idea what it consists of. What hell should I be trying to avoid? What heaven should I be trying to attain? Nobody can present a sound argument for any of this. We are blocked from investigating the supernatural, which is why people want to infer it. Oh, well, hey, it just seems like I can't think of any other explanation. Argument from ignorance. Don't say that. Explain the fallacy that something is not true merely because you haven't shown it to be false, or merely because you haven't come up with a better alternative. Oh, the sun orbits the earth. You could make a reasonable argument for that once upon a time. Sun goes around the earth. All the evidence pointed to that being the most reasonable conclusion, and the argument was valid and compelling until we figured out that one of the premises was unsound, and that cut out all of the reasonableness from that. And now the only way to even attempt to make that argument is to deny the observable facts about reality. As far as I can tell, everything that makes me me is a product of my brain. We know this from investigations where we have people who have brain damage, who have been through traumatic experiences, and every single thing that we identify with as a soul, as a part of the soul, is identifiable as something that the brain produces. What I like, my preferences, my personality, my memories. Which is why I made an argument that, based on, for example, my mom's idea of heaven, there's nobody in heaven, and my mom will never go there, because she's convinced that she will go to heaven, where there is no sadness, and she's convinced that I will go to hell, which would make her sad. Therefore, my mom's not going to heaven either. You're just as screwed as I am under your own religious idea. Enjoy your life. Enjoy each other to the extent that you're comfortable with it. Not everybody's good in a crowd. Not everybody's good around other people. Realize that when you're engaging with people, you're not the same person you were, and you have baggage that you're bringing into the conversations. You might change your mind about something tomorrow. You might find out something new and interesting about somebody you don't like that makes you like them. We need to, this poster, this isn't a NaNoCon poster, is it? It's up here all the time, I bet. Right? It's not NaNoCon? It is NaNoCon. Well, that ruins my point. So contribute, be kind, be patient, be honest, encourage people, apologize, forgive, thank people, love your people. The thing is, I had no idea whether that was a NaNoCon poster that was put up there to say those things, or whether that was the position of this Unity Church. I don't know, because it could fit. I've seen this stuff in churches. I've also seen God hates fags, so they're not all the same. But I've seen those ideas in churches. We can't just make an assumption about where this thing comes from, which is why I wanted to ask. Listen, and listen charitably. As charitable as you can possibly be. That doesn't mean let people walk all over you. That doesn't mean just take everything they say at face value. I don't know if anybody here who's part of Oasis? The Austin Oasis thing just started up, and they have this little banner that is, people are more important than beliefs. How cool is that? People are more important than beliefs. Everybody gets behind it. I don't. Ooh. Here's the thing. It's a neat simplification of what we're actually talking about, and I think it's a good thing, and I like it. But you could also say, well, hang on a minute. Beliefs inform actions, and actions have consequences. Beliefs do, in fact, matter. And the thing that may matter the most about people is what they believe, because that determines what they're going to do. So maybe it should be that people and their beliefs matter. You can argue this all kind. I could potentially be convincing either way. Which one's right? You don't know. I don't know. Well, we should go by the original intent of the author. Cool. We may have the luxury of doing that since this is new. We don't have that for the Bible, obviously. We can't interview anybody who wrote that to find out what their original intent is. And no matter what Justice Scalia, God rest his soul, or anybody else thought, you can't go back to find out exactly what the original intent of the founders was. So we should listen charitably. And if something sounds awful or a little askew, hang on a second. Please explain to me what you mean by that. Because your alternate options are to assume that you understand what they meant, either in agreement or in disagreement. And why bother assuming? Go ahead, have discussions and debates, talk about the privileged status of religion, talk about the communities that we have to build. But when you guys leave here after this awesome day, where there were people far better than I am at expressing important ideas about communities, what are you going to do? How are you going to participate? Did you get here and get your weekend atheist fix, and now you're going to go back and do nothing? Until the next time they bring in somebody that you want to hear, or the next time they have a get-together with beer and a bonfire? Is that enough? I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's clearly not the best thing. Well, I can't speak. I can't do what you do. Good. I got job security. I want to put myself out of a job. I think that's what most of us are trying to do here. As soon as religion's privileged status goes away and atheist normalcy exists and we have equality, we're no longer going to have free-thinking secular conventions. We're going to have conventions that are specific about equality or specific issues that we want to address. What are you going to do? Important thing to remember, almost everybody that you're ever going to meet has some skill or ability that would be useful to any of these organizations. Can you pick up a phone and make some phone calls? Can you donate some money? Can you set up chairs? Can you bring food to the stuff? Can you help advertise? Do you have connections with people who might make t-shirts? Or do you have a way of getting really good press coverage instead of just sending out a press release and hoping that the newspaper actually gets it? Do you have connections somewhere? Do you have a passion for cleaning the place up after everything's over? Because all of that is valuable, and all of it works to build community. My wife's currently trying to make 500 hats for the homeless over the next year. She thought it was going to be a tall order for the year. She's over 20% of the way done. I got her in a knitting machine. She cranks them out like crazy. We work with Atheists Helping the Homeless. We work with the Humanists at Work organizations. There's not enough people and not enough time to do everything that needs to be done. And I'm not telling you that if you walk out of here and don't do anything for the secular community until the next time there's a convention, that you're an awful human being. All I'm saying is, if everybody did that, where does that leave us? I've done lots of debates, and they ultimately end up about morality more often than not. What is the foundation of morality? How can you have a moral code without a God and all this other stuff? Morality is founded upon the facts of reality because that's what determines the consequences of our actions. Yes, but why should we care about all that stuff? How can you say what's right? All right. Everybody's heard the think globally, act locally meme, I'm sure. It's a good idea. When it comes to making decisions, though, one thing that I try to do is say, if everybody in the world took the same action that I'm taking now, would the world be better, worse, or the same. You get to participate at whatever level you're comfortable with, but you also bear the consequences of that decision. Someday, I'm convinced religions will die off or at least become negligible. I used to compare it to the flat earthers, and then all of a sudden, all these flat earthers started showing up, putting up videos on YouTube. But I'm confident that reason and reality will win out, and either we will have definitive proof of which God actually might possibly exist, or religions will fade. We're not here to wipe out religions. We're here to speed up the process, because while we wait for it to happen, doing nothing, it will take longer, people's rights and lives will be marginalized, and people will die. And I'm not being melodramatic. How many times do we pick up a newspaper and somebody's kid who could have been treated at a hospital is dead because the parents decided that fucking praying was better than going to the hospital? How many times do we read about somebody who committed suicide because they're not eligible for the same rights, they're not able to be who they are because some religious dirtbag feels that their version and interpretation of the book that they value more than any other thing trumps everybody's life? And I said, trumps on purpose. It's not easy. You've got to work together. You've got to figure out who you can work with. Because if I can't work with her, I might be able to work with him. And then we'll both accomplish what we wanted to do. You got to build bridges. And the only wall I want built is the one between religion and government. Thanks. Thank you. I probably rambled on far too long. I don't know if there's time for questions. Who's in charge? We have time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Line up right here.
Lay into me.
All right, if you guys got questions for Matt, let's make a line right here. Come on down, Charles. Or here, I'll bring it to you. Never mind.
There's a spot on stage where those two lights are like way bright, and then here, I can actually see people. So I get to hear and go, have I lost the crowd? That one, yes, that one, no.
Okay. Roman Catholic hospitals are becoming increasingly more prevalent.
And awful.
They're taking over other hospitals.
Yeah.
And I believe the situation now is that 1 in 6 hospitals in the United States is under the Roman Catholic Church. I think that it's unscientific and disgraceful that a person cannot go into a Roman Catholic hospital and get scientific medical treatment.
Yep.
And I think that people should raise their voices, and we should find out if the hospitals in our community are doing that. And I think this is something that nobody's paying much attention to.
Yeah.
And I think we need to pay close attention to it and do something about it.
I completely agree. I think, yeah, applause. I think one of the reasons that it doesn't get enough attention is because in many places you have a hospital within range of your home, and people care far more about, am I going to get some medical care than what's actually going on. For those who aren't aware, Catholic hospitals will always impose Catholic doctrine over proper medicine. And they do some things that I find beyond repugnant. I have a friend who's a social worker who works at a Catholic hospital, and a woman comes in and miscarries, and so she has to go through all of that trauma and grief, and they have a funeral, and then shortly after that, they drag her back in, because sometimes when you miscarry, you don't get everything out. And so they have to essentially deliver the rest of the placental material. And because it is birth matter by Catholic doctrine, they have to not only drag her back in, but sign a new form to have a second funeral for that. Now, is there anything medically wrong with having, no, there's nothing medically wrong with having somebody sign a form apart from the fact that you are traumatizing someone who has potentially gone through one of the worst things they'll ever experience. And you get to do all this in the name of doctrine. The problem is, when I talked about putting up the Catholic Church, or the religious hospitals and universities as if they're good things, they're not. They're not always good. Anytime that we should have, as a matter of law, a requirement that if you're going to operate a hospital and you're a church doing it, that's fine, but you don't ever get to have your doctrine impose on medical treatment. And this is, I mean, I don't even understand how this is happening, because the Hippocratic Oath should cover this, and yet it doesn't. And it's one of those things where, I was going to say people think they have bigger fish to fry, and then I thought, well, that's Catholic. It doesn't seem to be registering because people are getting health care and you don't necessarily have a choice. I have a somewhat popular, somewhat unpopular opinion that despite whatever changes we're getting to Obamacare or Trump care or Ryan care or whatever, I get the impression that most people, or most of the people that we've elected, don't care about people's health care. And I am absolutely in favor, despite what my libertarian friends will beat me over the head about saying, that we should have free health care to all that is science-based, that is not tied to any religion, and stop giving them the money to do it.
Okay, we got a mic posted here in the center. Anybody else come on up, ask a question?
I won't bite or spit on you. Yes, there's somebody back there. Oh, you don't get to ask a question. You heckled.
Of course I did. I actually I gave a workshop today on the alt-right and the atheist community, and some in our community that are actually enabling and supporting the alt-right in their own respect. Do you believe that in building our community and what we view as our community and the values that we as a general community think are important, do you think we have an obligation to call those people out and to possibly even fight against them and say that you're not exactly welcome here, we don't welcome your message, and we don't welcome the things that you stand for?
Yeah, so there's a documentary on Netflix called Welcome to Leith that is about a group of white supremacists that move into and take over this town and what the town does. I'm going to say something that may be incredibly unpopular, but bear with me for a moment. Everybody heard about Richard Spencer getting punched, right? I have friends that are like, yay, punch Nazis anywhere all the time. And I tried to make the point that while I understand that as best I can, that we're being perhaps a little loose with how we're labeling this, but at the end of the day, this guy has hateful ideas that are awful. And these ideas stem from the things that have destroyed, not just destroyed, slaughtered people in the name of these ideas. I am absolutely in favor of opposing that constantly, exactly up to the measure that is warranted. And this frustrates some people because, so when you get punched, I was pointing out that I'm opposed to just sucker punching people, that the cure for bad speech is better speech, that demonstrating how awful they are is a preferred method. But it's not the only way, and it's not the only thing that works. But my main argument against it is that it was strategically a poor idea. Because one of the smartest things Spencer could have done is said, hey, I'm getting ready to be interviewed. Why don't you come up and punch me? Because I will then have a higher ground, and this will be both. So if it was a good idea strategically for him to pay somebody to punch him, then I think it was a bad idea strategically for somebody to do it for free. Am I bothered at all that he got punched? Not really. I mean, if I was a cop there, I'd probably have to arrest the guy. If I was a DA, I don't know if I'd prosecute, or maybe here's a few hours of community service and a candy bar, but I don't want to relish in the idea of violence necessarily merely based on speech. That said, speech is not without effects. There's a difference between somebody saying, I want to live in a nation that only has white people, and somebody saying, I hate anybody who's not white and would kill them. There's a difference. Is it enough of a difference that we should treat their ideas differently? I don't think so. But is it enough of a difference that one of them may have to be opposed violently and the other one might not? I think so, but I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes. Oh, are you on TV? You look awesome.
I've seen 3 different movies where a kid got sick and went to the hospital, and then one day they suddenly got better, and everyone was like, oh, God did it, God did it.
Mm-hmm.
How can people believe that?
You win. So here's the thing, this comes up a lot. How can you possibly believe something like that? Anybody who would investigate, who had a good understanding of critical thinking about how we determine a causal connection, one of the guys on my show, his dad has said, I had a headache, I said a prayer and took an aspirin, which one fixed my headache? But the thing is, you could also say a prayer and not take an aspirin, and your headache's probably still gonna go away, because headaches go away most of the time, and if they don't, go to your doctor and get something better than prayer.
I guess maybe they just slap a sticker on the DVD that says true story.
Yes, true story, yeah. I should be channeling Pat Robertson right now. True story, true story. So one of the reasons that people believe is because they have come to believe something for bad reasons, and it keeps getting reinforced by everybody around them. I remember standing in church and being utterly convinced that I was feeling the presence of the Holy Spirit. Goosebumps, euphoria. Why did I believe that? Because
It's all in your mind.
Because when it happened, everybody else was saying, oh, this is what it feels like to be full of the Holy Spirit. I was taking their word for it. And there's also this thing that religions prey not only on our fears, but religions install fears in us that are irrational so that they can offer the only solution to that fear. Hey, we have a natural fear of dying. What's it going to be like when I'm gone? Is it going to be like anything? We're a religion. We can tell you, what's going on with that. Hey, this weird thing happened, and I don't have an explanation for it. Somebody got better, and we don't have a medical explanation. It's nice to think that God did it. The problem is, and what I would like to point out is, if that reasoning was correct, then God would also be responsible for all the people who didn't get healed. Because if he can heal this person, he should have been able to heal this one. So did he not like this one as much? There's nothing about the model that makes sense. But religions get people into a position where they're constantly reinforced. You have to. My 8 years in the Navy was instrumental to me leaving religion, even though I didn't do it during that time, because I had to interact with people who had different beliefs. Learning how to think critically, learning about scientific investigation and skepticism, we don't teach enough of that. And most people go to their church for a sense of, all right, now I'm pretending like I can read their minds. It's been reported that there are a lot of people who go to church primarily out of a sense of community, and that people believe in belief more than they believe in the thing that they think they believe.
I have another question.
Sure.
When I first became an atheist, and I first thought about the fact that, okay, so heaven's not real, like what's going to happen after death?
Mm-hmm.
It's really scary, and every now and then I think about it, and then I feel like running back to being Christian again, because I want to believe that something good's going to happen after death.
Yeah, I get that. I hear from people who've been atheists for 50 years who wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares of hell and dreading what may or may not come from an afterlife.
I just can't imagine not existing. It's something that the human brain can't possibly imagine.
Right. You've never experienced it because it's something that's impossible to experience. It's like saying, what were you like before you were born?
Because now if you can die and then come back, that would be wonderful, because then I would know what death's like and I wouldn't be scared. But, I mean, and then everyone's curious, but by the time it actually happens, they're gone. They can't come back.
So far as we can tell, yeah.
And it's just really weird and scary. And
It is, but I will say this. The reason it's scary is, first of all, we don't know. And second of all, somebody's running around pretending that they do know and using it to exploit the really rational fear. I don't know what's going to happen. That puts us in a position where we're potentially a little nervous or anxious, and somebody is running around saying, I know what's going to happen, and it's going to be bad unless you do what I say, and then it's going to be good. Religions are preying on that kind of fear.
So would Christianity, the idea of going to heaven when you die, wouldn't that kind of encourage people to want to die?
Thank you.
All right, last question. You got it.
So, when you're old enough, and your dad says okay or whatever, or when you're old enough to not care whether or not your dad says okay, come on down to Austin. You can sit in on the show and do that. Because we've raised this issue before. The natural progression, you hear about people like Andrea Yates who drowned her children so that they wouldn't grow up and become corrupt and end up in hell. If the model of many versions of Christianity were in fact true, the version she subscribed to, if it were true, that is the single most loving thing anybody could ever do. She damned herself to hell to guarantee that she could use a loophole to get her kids to heaven. What better that's better than Jesus' 3-day sacrifice where he got to go be God. That is the natural progression of that line of thought. I'll let you do your question, and it's the last one. At an event one time, a couple of Catholics were sitting in the back, some students at a university, and they asked me, well, which idea is more beautiful, Christianity or atheism? And I said, I don't care. I care about which one's true. And on that note, whichever one is true is automatically the most beautiful, because the other one's a lie, which is ugly. So yes, you got a question or a comment?
Yeah, real quickly, I noticed earlier you had...
Do you hate me yet? Because you liked me earlier.
No, I don't hate you quite
Yay.
yet. Give me some more time.
All right. I'm leaving now while I'm ahead. Go ahead.
No, real quickly, you mentioned earlier the importance of challenging other people to debate and discussion, and also the importance of Socratic questioning. I noticed that you had been implementing some of the methods of street epistemology on the show, and that you're very, well acquainted with Anthony Magnabosco, and I just wanted to mention that because you encourage so many of us to get out in our everyday conversations with others and challenge their thinking a bit. And I just wanted to ask how effective you felt the street epistemology method was, and if you could kind of go into what you like about it and kind of plug it a bit.
Sure.
That's it.
Although I'm not sure how much I'm going to plug it, and this might make you not like me. Peter Boghossian wrote a book called A Manual for Creating Atheists, and in it he coined this term street epistemology, or used it. It's really just the Socratic method. The thing is that it's not necessarily, so the book I think is a bit of a misnomer. It's not a manual for creating atheists. It's not a method for creating atheists. Because what street epistemology tends to do is assess someone's confidence level in their belief, then have a conversation, and then reassess their confidence level in the belief. Now, Anthony Magnabosco has put up a bunch of videos. He's a good friend of mine who lives in San Antonio. We've actually had conversations about this, which I recorded and posted at the Atheist Debates thing, so I won't go into all of it. I, of course, love Socratic dialogue. I like anything that makes people think and question and doubt. That's how we get closer and closer to having reasonably proportional confidence to what we actually believe. I have concerns about street epistemology in the way that it's sometimes presented, because if I start a conversation with you and say, you're a God believer, okay? How confident are you that God exists? 100%. And then we have a 10-minute conversation. 80. How confident are you now? 80. 80%. Cool. Have I lowered his confidence 20%? No. Not, I may have. We can't say that. It may be that he was actually at 80%, but was escalating it before the conversation forced him to recognize that the honest answer is 80%. If, in fact, even if we did lower his confidence or his willingness to express confidence in the future from 100 to 80, we still haven't created an atheist. We've created an 80% confident theist. I love the fact that the tools and methods are useful and can be applied to things other than religion. I love the fact that a friend of mine is having success and teaching other people, and they are definitely skills and tools that I would encourage anybody to try out and use. Just make sure that you're aware of what it's actually doing and the fact that we don't have enough research to determine what it's actually doing. So the best case scenario is there's a lot of conversations about should we be diplomats or firebrands. I'm both, depending on the day, depending on my mood, depending on who I'm talking to, and I think we need both, just as the gay rights movement needed the assless chaps wearing, dancing around gay pride people, and they needed the gay lawyers in suits. You have to do a multi-pronged approach, and I see a whole bunch of prongs here. Thank you, Nashville Nuns, for having me out. Thanks to Gail and Elliot, Peter, and everybody else here. This has been wonderful. I hope you do something. Don't feel bad if you don't, but I promise you'll feel better if you do.
All right.
Thank you.